I wouldn't say I'm hugely inspired right now, but I've changed the name of my board game because the old name, Battle for the Questions, was too colonial. What I'm more interested in is calling it migration. So then instead of vying to occupy territory, you compete to apply for accommodations. And the way that you become welcome is the same either way. You become welcome by answering a question about the domain that you have received accommodations from. It began in a linguistic anthropology class where we discussed the meaning of words that have to do with language anthropology. Things like speech network, triglossia, bilingual, the ability to speak two languages such as a late deafened adult using sign. There are many terms of interest. Registers, for example, are a variety of language considered appropriate to a given situation. And the questions that pertain to anthropology fall into 12 domains. Origins, Caribbean, archaeology, Mexico, history, syntax. For example, where was the land of Opane when King Solomon hid his gold? I don't know. That's the right answer because nobody knows. I pose them as yes or no questions for people who haven't taken classes in anthropology and linguistic anthropology so that it's fair and fun to play. But so, for example, if you had a question about Peru, what century was the Spanish conquest of Mesoamerica? I would say 15th century, true or false? That's false. It was the 16th century. And there are different types of dice to keep it fun. This was the prototype for the game. It was the question, what 13 things did Hawkett say all languages share? Design features. So you see, it's a learning game, and there are pieces that help you mark out where you've found accommodations. There are pegs, and there's a study book if you want to become very good and knowledgeable about what the pegs, keep track of things. I mean, buttons to keep track of things and pegs to mark how you buy with rivals. There's different sided dice. For each turn, the person who's beginning chooses any dice they want to make the game first play. And the person vying wins all toss. These are the pegs for the board. See. And there's rules such as if you get accommodations in and migrate to a territory, even under the colonial system, when you occupied, the magnanimous rule of magnanimity, it's the other person's turn. Can you imagine if President Clinton had observed the rule of magnanimity, how difficult the excuses would be to justify the invasion of the Ukraine? Too bad. Now, we know from the anthropology game that was designed by the Totality Board Menace that it was called Two Virgins moral ball. And the idea was that it was clocked to the AIDS attack by, although the angry fathers movement that included such hucksters as some of the Green Party black leaders and Ronald Reagan worked with the Wagner Group of Russia and the Russian Orthodox Church while they were drumming up um, nuclear threats because they were masquerading as Old Testament gods for the mayhem of the oligarchs who leapfrog behind the scenes to bring on this deluge. And we know that Carnegie Mellon University, Jaime Carbonell and Gregor Morgan were behind this, terrifying image of a finger with a snot on it. You're going to eat that. And then they moved me to coma and poisoned me in the mouth for COVID. So um, what they're doing is chattel slavery masquerading as fidelity and marriage unions. If you deviate from fidelity and marriage, it's masqueraded as fidelity. Um, it's part of the Cold War system of manufactured scarcity. They called dibs on the stray women, and supposedly make you fight over them. But you wonder, what if Russia were supplied to head and toe with flutes and crash cymbals and drums, and they simply marched into another country? People would fall over laughing, but at least it would be peaceful. Now, I want to talk a minute about a good example of the fourth dimensional union that came out of the early era of the 20th century, back in the First World War, who schemed up this fossil fuel, this Old Testament deluge that's coming. Wispansky, the fourth dimensional philosopher, D.W. Griffith, who invented the KKK's burning cross image and worked with Hitler and Reagan on a Houdini operation from the fourth dimension where the oligarchs operate from, which is the truth about what Yoko Ono and Lenin did. You can watch my other videos for evidence about that. But a good example of the fourth dimensional um, syndicate is In the Heat of the Night, a Sidney Poitier 60s anti-segregation film about a black detective who lands in a small town. And it follows the theme of the Texas School Book. It's a hot and heavy image of a woman standing in a window nude in the heat of the night. And this is the challenge of the fourth dimension. They have a detective inside the think tank of the semiotics who was sent the Texas School Book. Now let's see you get out of the web by explaining to people, educating people about what you did in the heat of the night. And then if you compare the tradition of that Russia and Tacoma and Reagan and Hitler all abide by, which is the punishment of cowards and deserters, and the idea that Knights of Resignation is the noble status of man. Within the heat of the night, what you get really is the texture of rosewood, the use of any excuse to whip up a nightmare. And I think that the Ukraine follows the pattern of being used as a rosewood. The Velvet Revolution was in an occupation, and there was no occupation going on. Ukraine didn't have to. What happened in 2014, I somewhat agree with the Russians about, because the people who tried to cooperate from Russia with the changing system were participating. It wasn't an overt occupation like Prague Spring was put down by. Now it's happening, but the traditional explanation for what's going on in the Ukraine follows the line of the magnanimity principle. When someone has been, when you've made a gain over a rival, magnanimously let them take a turn. I believe that would have resolve this problem before it got out of hand. Clinton's wisdom is not very wise, but it looks to me like behind the scenes, Clinton was in on what Reagan and the Russian Orthodox Church were pulling with the Great Deluge, with the Old Testament angry fathers, with the oligarch leapfrogging behind the scenes, and with the illusion masters. The puppet show that Yoko Ono used me to put on in transformation by the Axis to the Green Party. Really, the Green Party are not vengeful, angry fathers. They're um, war gamers. And it's important to remember that in saying that they are avenging on other people's freedom to interact socially and have consensual lovemaking, boyfriend girlfriend relations, they're basically jumping up out of the hollow of the carousel club that killed Lee Harvey Oswald and JFK and saying, you know, the angry fathers have struck a deal with the church and the fallen women will be sold into slavery. And it's important not to let the idea get around that UW dialectical and Pitt fraternities and Carnegie Mellon are selling, which is that it's some sort of principle of fidelity. There's nothing principled about wargaming for trafficking and trophy kills. And they had no business saying I was after trophy kills. They by manipulating appearances the way they did. But you can learn a lot by looking at the social anthropology of two virgins moral ball. Well, it isn't moral ball. It's conquest ball. It's pussy ball. That's what they did. And it comes directly from the intelligence system of the English Empire. The Beatles were behind it. And it's important to understand what that means about what the Beatles did. They used Houdini and the illusion machine that traces back to Blythe Sanders and Ouspensky, D.W. Griffith, and Mussolini's little boy, who was a big name in Hollywood, a real hotshot. This has been being planned from the days when they first introduced the Burning Cross. What business did the NAACP have defending Reagan against something like that? He was working with the people who were the first use of the Burning Cross when they know the whole thing was an entrapment scheme. Well, they have a white and they want to incinerate the white. What does that have to do with morality? It doesn't have anything to do with morality. It's angry fathers doing oligarch mayhem for an illusion machine. Those are the three things you have to keep in mind. It's Hollywood, the billionaire money bags, and the Longbeards. And, there's evidence here that the Wagner Group from Russia, espionage, were brought in for the Texas school book by Reagan's forces. This was traces back to the days when Disney was working with Sergei Eisenstein, the Russian Empire's cinema machine. Don't be fooled. But migration is a better concept for a game. I don't like the colonial model. You apply for territory, and if you get the question about the territory correct, you get accommodations. Try to know what you're getting yourselves into, is my message. It's the new theme of my game. I've abolished the colonial model in favor of a cooperative approach to meaningful rivalry. The questions are quite interesting. I'll give you another one from the Caribbean. Where did Christopher Columbus think he was when he reached the Bahamas? Japan.